dive right in. So here's our game plan. We'll start at the very beginning, at the cellular level, to get to the root cause. Then we'll look at the clinical appearance. After that, we'll cover how a diagnosis is actually confirmed, and we'll wrap up by exploring the different ways it's managed.
First up, a proliferation of cells. So what is Kaposi sarcoma, really? What's going on at the most fundamental level?
At its heart, Kaposi's sarcoma is basically a mass that forms when endothelial cells start multiplying out of control. And if you're wondering, endothelial cells are the ones that line all of our blood vessels. You know, for a long time, researchers were exploring a whole bunch of different ideas for what could be causing this. They were looking at everything: genetics, things in the environment, different kinds of infections, and even problems with the immune system itself. But then there was a huge breakthrough. Scientists found a specific virus, human herpes virus type 8, or HHV8 for short, present in every single form of Kaposi sarcoma. This was the smoking gun. It pointed directly to HHV8 as the main cause, the etiological agent. Okay, so we know a virus is behind it, but how does that actually show up in a person? What does the clinical picture look like? Let's take a look. So it turns out there are three main ways this condition can present. You've got the classical form, which usually shows up as red nodules on the legs of older men with a Mediterranean background, and it tends to be pretty slow-moving. Then there's the endemic form, found in both kids and adults in Africa, and finally, the immunodeficiency form, which, as the name suggests, is tied to people with weakened immune systems, especially those with HIV/AIDS. Now, here's a really critical point. When it comes to lesions inside the mouth, they are almost exclusively seen in that immunodeficiency form. Actually, about half of all AIDS patients who have Kaposi sarcoma will also get these oral lesions. And these images here give you a really clear idea of what we're talking about. The most common places for them to appear are the palate, that's the roof of your mouth, like you see here, the gums, and the tongue. They can start as little flat spots, but they can also grow into these larger, raised nodular masses that are usually a reddish or bluish color. Okay, so after seeing something that looks like this, how does a doctor go from just a suspicion to being absolutely certain? Well, that brings us to confirming the diagnosis. It's actually pretty straightforward. To get a definitive answer and see exactly what's happening with those cells, a biopsy of the lesion is taken. And what's really interesting is what they find under the microscope. An early lesion can look a lot like a hemangioma, which is just a common, harmless growth of blood vessels. But in a late-stage lesion, it develops this very unique appearance, a solid mass of spindle-shaped cells. And that brings us to our final section, the pathways to management. Because once that diagnosis is confirmed, the treatment plan has to be carefully tailored to each individual person. The treatment strategy really depends on the lesion itself. I mean, if it's not causing any real problems functionally or cosmetically, then active treatment might not even be needed. For smaller lesions, the options could be surgically removing it, using low-dose radiotherapy, or even injecting chemotherapy directly into it. But for larger, more spread-out lesions, that's when a systemic chemotherapy approach is usually necessary. So when you step back and look at the whole story, from figuring out it's caused by a single virus to creating such a specific, tailored treatment for each case, it's pretty amazing. It really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? What can this kind of targeted approach teach us about how we'll treat other virus-linked cancers in the future?